හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Tuesday, the 21st of November 2023. Budget budges. Second reading of Budget 2024 passed in Parliament with 45 majority votes. Green economy. President unveils plans to enact an energy transition law and multi-agency committee to guide decision-making on energy projects.
Why do I ask for green hydrogen? Because we have a future with green hydrogen to begin with at home.
Electricity Acts. Cabinet approves the new electricity bill to facilitate the process of unbundling the CEB's services. Cricket reprieve. Sri Lanka given the green light to compete in international cricket tournaments after ban. However, it loses the opportunity to host the Under-19 World Cup.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to today's edition of AdaDerana's English News. First at 9, I'm Jonathan Benedict. We're going to take a look at our news stories for the hour, starting with our top story right now. The second reading of the appropriation bill for the fiscal year 2024 was passed in Parliament today by a majority of 45 votes. Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa announced this after 122 parliamentarians voted in favour of the budget, while 77 voted against it. On the 13th of November, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as the Minister of Finance, presented the budget 2024 at the country's 78th budget speech. At the debate today, Samaki Jana Balawegaya parliamentarian Dr. Harsha De Silva requested that the government introduce an amendment to the budget to ensure that it is not passed with a budget deficit exceeding 5%, to which State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinga said that the request could be considered.
දෙදහක ආර්ථික ඍණ ගියේ නැද්ද? කවුද ආයෙ ඉදිරිපත් කළේ? මේ පැත්තේ නෙමෙයි ඉන්නේ. ඔය පැත්තේ ඉන්නේ. ඒ වෙලාවේ කැබිනට් එක ඔක්කොම නම් කරලා දැම්ම නම් මූලික ආර්ථික සම්පෙස්සමට ඔය විපක්ෂින්ට බර ගානක් මේ ලයිව් ස්ට්‍රීම මූලික ආර්ථික සංකම් කඩ කළයි කියලා ඒගොල්ලන්ගෙන මුත් වෙනවා.
ගරු නියෝජක කතානායකතුමනි, අත්වින් මේ සභාවේදී ආර්ථිකය සම්බන්ධව අපිට විශාල චෝදනාවක් නැගුවා. ඒ හැම චෝදනාවක්ම අපි ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරනවා. දැන් එක අයගේ අයිති නැති කරන කතා කරන උදවියත් ඒ කාලේ කරපුවා අපිට මතකයි. හැබැයි චෝදනාවක් නැගුව පමණින් මඩවලට උත්තර දෙන්න අපි ආයේ මඩ අල්ලන්න අවශ්‍යද? කාගේ හරි අයිතියක් නැති කරන්න කතා කරන අය අනුම රටේ ජනතාවගේ අයිතිය තහවුරු කරගන්න වැඩ කරලා ඉන්නේ. අපි ඉතිහාසයේ පුරාවට ජනතාවට ජීවිත අයිතිය සුරක්ෂිත කරන තැන ඉඳන් යුතුයකම් ඉටු කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා නැති කරන්න කතා කරන අය අයිතියක් රැක දෙන්න එක අමාරු බව දැන්වත් වටහා ගන්න කියලා ඉල්ලන්නේ.
ප්‍රායෝගිකව භූමියේ සිදු කළ හැකි හොඳම අයවැයක් ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. අභියෝග මැස්සේ කළ හැකි සියලු දේවල් කරලා තියෙනවා. අලුත් ආර්ථික මාවතකට පාර කපන්නට අවශ්‍ය පෞෂකම් සලසා දීලා තියෙනවා. මේ සංසන්දනය කළ යුත්තේ පෞද්ගලික මාස 18කට පෙර තිබුණු රටේ තත්ත්වය තුළ ක්‍රිකට් සඳහා දෙපාර්ශ්වය එකතු වෙලා එකඟතාවය මේ රටේ ආර්ථිකය ගොඩනගන්නත් ඇති කරගමුයි කියලා ඉල්ලා සිටිමින් මම මගේ වචන ස්වල්පේ නවත්තනවා.
විසර්ජන 50 කෙටුම්පත 2024 දෙවැනි වර කියවීම සභාව එකඟද?
අපි amendment එකක් මේකට අවශ්‍යයි කියලා කිව්වා. මොකද 2003 මූල්‍ය කළමනාකරන පනතට අනුව නීතිය තමයි බජට් එකේ ඩෙෆිසිට් එක 105ට වඩා වැඩි වෙන්න බෑ. එතකොට දැන් මේ බජට් එක පාස් කරන්න යන්නේ 105ට වඩා බජට් ඩෙෆිසිට් එකක් තියාගෙන. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වුණා යම්කිසි විදියක සංශෝධනයක් අද ගෙනේ කියලා. ඒක ගෙනාවේ නෑ. 2016 2018 කියන අවුරුදු දෙකේ හැර ඔය කියන රාමුව තුල අයවැය පරතරය තිබිලා නැහැ. අපි පිළිගන්නවා කලින් මේ නීතිය අපි පිළිපැද්දේ නැහැ. ඒකේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් හැටියට අද අපි රට බංකොලොත් වෙලා. අපි පාඩමක් ඉගෙන ගන්නේ නැද්ද? ගරු කතානායකතුමනි අපිට සලකලා බලන්න පුළුවන්.
During the vote for the second reading of the appropriation bill, 122 parliamentarians in total voted in favour, while 77 have voted against it. As a result, the second reading of the appropriation bill for the fiscal year 2024 was passed in Parliament today by a majority of 45 votes.
දෙවැනි වර කියවීම සම්මතයි.
And so, to realise the ambitious goals of the government in becoming a regional green energy hub, President Ranil Wickremesinghe announced plans for a new committee and an energy transition law, signalling a commitment to a holistic decision-making process regarding new energy projects. Addressing Sri Lanka Green Hydrogen Symposium 2023, President Wickremesinghe highlighted Sri Lanka's potential to becoming a renewable energy exporter with available resources already within the island. The Sri Lanka Green Hydrogen Symposium 2023 was held in Colombo this morning under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe. During the symposium, Sri Lanka's National Hydrogen Roadmap was presented by the Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara to the head of state. This roadmap is a collaborative effort between the Petroleum Development Authority of Sri Lanka and Greenstat Hydrogen India with the support of the United States Agency for International Development.
So we have at the moment the potential of becoming energy export, and that's what we have to think of. How are we going to maintain this goal? How are we going to achieve this goal? It also means energy independence for Sri Lanka. From the whole dry zone, why don't we become an exporter of energy? Solar and wind, both are there. So long ago, 2000 years ago, when we were dry zone, we exploited it for irrigation and became exporter of grain. Now we can become an exporter of energy. Let's go for it. That is my idea. Sri Lanka needs a new economy, and this has to be one of it. Green energy, solar power, wind power. We are just scratching the surface. I think the World Bank draft gave us about 50 gigawatts. Even 50 gigawatts is big looking at the requirements of many other countries. You have the surplus to export. Let's build on it. That is my view, and that's what I'm going at. Now you talk of $10 billion worth of investment for a bankrupt country. Just imagine having $10 billion worth of investment by 2030. That makes a big difference to our economy. It makes it more attractive. Why do I ask for green hydrogen? Because we have a future with green hydrogen. To begin with at home, we will have our ports. We'll be able to supply green hydrogen. We become a regional location. Just look at that, and if you need it for aircrafts, okay, logistics and energy linked together. So many other areas, manufacturing. So this is why I've decided that we go in for few of the newer technologies. Green energy is one. Sri Lanka will have an energy transition law, and immediately I'll be setting up a new committee which will have multi-agency committee. The cabinet paper will most probably be submitted to cabinet next week.
The U.S. is here to partner with you, with Sri Lanka, as we adapt to the impacts of climate change and pioneer new technologies that will create a cleaner, safer, and more sustainable world for all. And the DFC is open to providing more financing, especially in renewables. Now, as Sri Lanka moves forward with its energy reforms, I'm confident that the U.S. government and U.S. investors will be here to inject the financing and know-how to unlock the potential of Sri Lanka's private sector for energy security and economic growth.
We have been discussing with Sri Lanka various ways of interconnectivity of energy transmission. Mind you, if and when Sri Lanka, and it's not an if, it's a question of when, Sri Lanka connects to India for a bi-directional flow of power. Of course, Sri Lanka has this huge potential, so ultimately it will be exports from Sri Lanka, like now it is happening from India's other neighbors, such as Nepal and Bhutan, and of course Bangladesh shall join that very shortly. And it's already connected to the Indian grid. So Sri Lanka doesn't get connected only to the Indian grid, but to the BBIN grid. And therefore, the trade of power as a commodity which is happening in India can also then become a more regional reality.
In my view, Sri Lanka has the ability, at least per capita, to become a regional superpower in green energy. And that's why this agenda is so exciting. A lot of countries will have to meet their commitments on climate by importing things like green hydrogen. And that's where this great export opportunity for Sri Lanka arises. The hydrogen roadmap that Sri Lanka is developing will be a key tool to help us understand how we can support that journey.
Sri Lanka's Cabinet of Ministers have granted approval to introduce a new electricity reform bill to cater to the contemporary socio-economic and administrative requirements of the country when introducing institutional reformation for the electricity sector. As such, clearance from the Attorney General has been received for the draft bill prepared by the legal draftsman, with approval from the Cabinet to publish the draft bill in the Government Gazette and for presentation to the Parliament for approval. The new proposed act is expected to facilitate the process of unbundling the services of CEB, improving efficiency, transparency and competition, and allow private sector participation in the electricity sector. Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara stated that the bill was prepared over the past 10 months with the assistance of energy and legal experts from development agencies and industry stakeholders. The bill received the certification of the Attorney General in October after the proposed amendments by the Attorney General's Department were incorporated by the Legal Draftsman's Department. According to the new Reform Act, the current Ceylon Electricity Board is expected to be divided into 6 fully government-owned entities, with the current 23,000 employees being divided into those entities. The division will result in 6 branches, including 2 transmission entities and 4 distribution entities.
විශාල කාලයක් ඉතා පුළුල් ලෙස සාකච්ඡා සම්බන්ධන වැඩමුළු යනාදියට සම්බන්ධ වෙලා විශාල වෙහෙසක් දරලා ශ්‍රී ලංකා විදුලි බල පනත් කෙටුම් පතක් ඉදිරිපත් කළා. ඒ ඉදිරිපත් කළ පනත් කෙටුම් පතට තවත් අදහස් අමාත්‍යවරුන්ගේ තියෙනවා නම් ඒවා ලබා දීම සඳහා කාලයක් ලැබලා දීලා මේ පනත් කෙටුම් පත අවසාන වශයෙන් ඊයේ ඉදිරිපත් වුණා. එය ලංකාවේ පුනර්ජනනීය විදුලි බල ශක්තිය ඉතා විශාල වශයෙන් වර්ධනය කිරීම සඳහා ඒ සඳහා දේශීය විදේශීය ආයෝජන විශාල ලෙස ආකර්ෂණය කර ගැනීම සඳහා ලංකාවේ විදුලි අනාගත මිල අඩු වෙන විදුලි බල සැපීමේ කාර්යක්ෂමතාවය උපරිම ලෙස වර්ධනය කිරීමට අවශ්‍ය විධිවිධාන මේ පනතේ ඇතුළත්ව තිබෙන බව තුමා කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට දැනුම් දුන්නා.
The legal draftsman was kept busy because the Cabinet of Ministers has also granted approval to direct the legal draftsman to prepare a draft bill for the introduction of the Broadcasting Regulatory Commission for electronic media. The objective of this initiative is to ensure a precise media practice in order to safeguard the maximum freedom of speech and expression, which was initially taken up for discussion at the Cabinet meeting held on the 22nd of September 2022. Let's take a look at some other Cabinet decisions that were taken up for discussion yesterday. Cabinet spokesman Bandula Gunawardena confirmed that Sri Lanka is expected to sign the proposed Sri Lanka-Thailand Free Trade Agreement on the 3rd of February 2024, subsequent to the completion of the rounds of discussions to be held in the upcoming month of December. According to the agreements made in the 6th and 7th rounds of the discussions, Cabinet decided to grant approval to the Customs Levy Release Programme of Sri Lanka.
ලංකාව අපනයනාභිමුඛ ආර්ථිකයේ උපරිම ප්‍රතිලාභ ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා ලෝකයේ විවිධ රටවල් සමග කඩිනමින් දෙරාජ්‍යයටම වාසිදායක වන පරිද්දෙන් වෙළඳ කිවිසුම් ඇති කර ගැනීම සඳහා විශාල උනන්දුවකින් කටයුතු කරනවා. එවැනි එක් රටක් තායිලන්තේ මෙය තායිලන්තය හා ශ්‍රී ලංකාව අතර පවතින වෙළඳ සම්බන්ධතා වැඩි දියුණු කළා. අපනයන විවිධාංගීකරණය සඳහා අපනයන වෙළඳපොළ විවිධාංගීකරණය සඳහා අපනයන නව්‍යකරණය සඳහා අපනයන උපයුම් ප්‍රවර්ධනය සඳහා අතිශයින් වැදගත් වෙයි කියලා කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ විශ්වාසය පළ කළා.
The Cabinet of Ministers has given approval to a proposal by Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena to implement a mechanism in the public sector for the prevention and resolution of dispute in the public service sector. The decision has been taken after observing the success of the implemented pilot projects in the health and transportation sectors by obtaining technical financial support from the International Labour Organization. As such, it has been decided to establish workplace forums in government institutions, sectoral forums comprising representatives of trade unions and management for health, transport, ports and shipping, power and energy, education and other sectors, and the National State Dialogue Forum comprising representatives of trade unions, relevant ministries or sectoral councils, Director Generals of institutions and representatives of the Departments of Management Services. It was also decided to establish 9 provincial mediation boards at the provincial level and a national arbitration pool under the Ministry of Public Administration.
දීර්ඝ කාලයක පටන් අපේ රටේ රාජ්‍ය සේවයේ ඉතා විශාල ලෙස උද්ඝෝෂණ පිකටින් වැඩවර්ජන යනාදිය නිමක් නැතුව සිද්ධ වෙන තත්ත්වයක් පවතිනවා. මේ තුලින් සේව්‍ය සේවක දෙපාර්ශ්වය අතර පවතින අනවබෝධ තත්ත්වයන් සම්පූර්ණයෙන් පහ කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන අතර වඩා විනිවිද පේන ආකාරයට මේ දෙපාර්ශ්වය අතර අන්තර් සහයෝගීතාවය වර්ධනය කරලා ගැටුම් වළක්වලා ගැටුම් හැමක් ඇති වුණොත් ඒ පහසුවෙන් निराකරණය කර ගැනීම තුලින් ශ්‍රම ඵලදායීත්වය වැඩි කරලා රටේ ආර්ථික ප්‍රගමනය සඳහා විශාල දායකත්වයක් සැමගෙන් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන ඉතා වැදගත් යෝජනාවක් ලෙස සලකලා අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමා ඉදිරිපත් කළ එම යෝජනාවට අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා.
In another decision, Cabinet has approved a proposal by the Minister of Health to apply the limit of total aflatoxin in internationally recognized food supplements. The decision was made to avoid difficulties in procuring maize for the production of triposha, as production is facing inconveniences due to the stringent permissible limits for total aflatoxins prescribed in the existing regulations under the Food Act. In other news, Cabinet has decided to lease the Sea Bank Rest Building and land in Norelia, owned by the Urban Development Authority, to Colonial Properties Private Limited for a lease period of 50 years. The decision has been taken following the recommendations of the Cabinet-appointed Standing Negotiation Committee after evaluating the competitive investment proposals that were called to redevelop and maintain the land. RM Parks of the United States signed a $110 million US agreement, with the Board of Investments of Sri Lanka to bring Shell PLC products to the island. In an X message, the BOI said that RM Parks and Shell collaboration will operate 200 fuel stations and provide services of mini supermarkets with electric vehicle charging facilities. Last year, the Sri Lankan government decided to open up Sri Lanka's fuel import and retail sales market to companies from oil-producing nations in a bid to address the foreign exchange crisis. In March this year, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the award of licenses to China's Sinopec, Australia's United Petroleum and RM Parks of the US in collaboration with multinational oil and gas company Shell plc to enter the fuel retail market in Sri Lanka. Later in June of this year, a 20-year agreement was inked between the Sri Lankan government and RM Parks in collaboration with Shell plc for a long-term contract for the import, storage, distribution and sale of petroleum products on the island. Following the recent suspension of Sri Lanka cricket, the International Cricket Council Board has named a new host nation for the 15th edition of the ICC Men's Under-19 Cricket World Cup 2024 in January. The ICC Men's Under-19 Cricket World Cup 2024 in January will be held in South Africa after the ICC board met today confirmed that Sri Lanka would be replaced as hosts. Sri Lanka cricket was recently suspended by the International Cricket Council for allegedly breaching its obligations as a member, namely for failing to manage its affairs autonomously and without government interference. However, in a welcome reprieve after the board meeting, a decision was taken to allow Sri Lanka to continue to compete internationally, both in bilateral cricket and ICC events, with the caveat that funding to Sri Lanka cricket will henceforth be controlled by the ICC. As a result, the Under-19 event has been moved to South Africa that hosted the Women's Under-19 T20 World Cup earlier this year. Welcome back. State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinga announced today that a $50 million fund will be created to provide loans to small and medium-scale enterprises affected from the economic crisis at a single-digit interest rate. He made these comments while addressing a special media briefing held last evening in Colombo, which was joined by officials of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and Economic Stabilisation Unit of the President's Office. This was followed by an update of good news from the Director of Economic Research of the Central Bank, Dr. PKG Harishchandra, who said that private sector credit growth has significantly improved, showcasing an improvement in the country's economic activity.
පුද්ගලිකාංශේ ණය ගැනීම වල කැපී පෙනෙන වර්ධනයක් අපි දැන් දකිනවා. බිලියන 70ක් විතර වගේ වැඩි වුණා සෙප්තැම්බර් මාසෙ. යම්කිසි සාධනීය තත්ත්වයක් මොකද ආර්ථිකය නැවත හරි ගැසලා එනකොට ණය ගැනීම වර්ධන වේගයක් එන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට තමයි ආර්ථික කටයුතු තවදුරටත් වැඩි වෙන්නේ. රාජ්‍ය මූල්‍ය අංශය වෙතට රෙවෙනියු වල කැපී පෙනෙන වර්ධනයක් තියෙනවා. 4.7% of GDP තිබ්බ රෙවෙනියු ගිය අවුරුද්දේ first 8 months වල දැන් 5.8% වලට වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා.
දෙසැම්බර් 31 වන විට රුපියල් බිලියන 2700 800 අතර ප්‍රමාණයකින් රාජ්‍ය ආදායමට දායකත්වය ලැබෙනවා. ඒ අනුව බදු නොවන ආදායම් සමග ට්‍රිලියන 3 ඉක්ම වූ ආදායමක් අපි අපේක්ෂා කරනවා. අපි මේ ට්‍රිලියන 3ක ආදායම් ඉලක්කය රාජ්‍යයේ ආදායම් ඉලක්කය සම්පූර්ණ කරගත්තොත් අපිට හැකියාවක් පවතිනවා මම කියන විදිහට ප්‍රාථමික අතිරික්තයක් දක්වා අපගේ රටේ ආර්ථිකය නගා සිටුවන්න.
සුළු හා මධ්‍ය පරිමාණ ව්‍යාපාර. වැඩිම පීඩාවකට පත්වෙච්ච අනිකුත් කාණ්ඩය. ඒ වගේම මේ සිදු කරපු විවිධ ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ තුල අපි හිතනවා යම් ප්‍රමාණයක ඔවුන්ට සහයෝගයක් ලැබුණා. ඒ සිදුවෙච්ච ඍණාත්මක බලපෑම තුල ඔවුන්ට තවදුරටත් සාමාන්‍ය පරිදි ව්‍යාපාර කටයුතු කිරීමේ හැකියාවක් නැහැ. ඊට අමතරව අඩු පොලියට ණය ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන් මූල්‍ය පහසුකම් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන් විශේෂයෙන්ම වාණිජ බැංකු මැදිහත් වෙලා ණය ලබා දෙන්න පුළුවන් තවත් අරමුදලක් ඒ වෙනුවෙන් ඇමරිකානු ඩොලර් මිලියන 50ක මුදලකුත් මේ වර්ෂයේ 2024 වර්ෂය තුල ජනවාරි මාසයෙන් පස්සේ ලබා දෙන්න කටයුතු කරනවා. දැනට සිදු කරලා තියෙන සාකච්ඡා අනුව අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා තනි ඉලක්කමක අගයකට ඔවුන්ට ණය පහසුකම් ලබා ගැනීමේ ක්‍රමවේදය සකස් කරනවා.
The rate of inflation, as measured by the National Consumer Price Index on a year-on-year basis, has increased to 1% in October of this year from 0.8% recorded in September. According to the Department of Census and Statistics, year-on-year inflation in the food group remained unchanged in October at minus 5.2%, while non-food group inflation has risen to 6.3% in October from the 5.9% recorded in September. For the month of October, the contribution of food commodities on a year-on-year basis was minus 2.41%. The contribution of non-food categories was 3.40%, mainly due to price increases in alcoholic beverages, tobacco and narcotics, clothing and footwear, housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels, furnishings, household equipment and routine household maintenance, health, communication, recreation and culture, education and miscellaneous goods and services during the period. Sri Lanka is expected to broaden in the year 2024 as the government expects to increase its tax revenue and the overall government revenue in the upcoming year. However, tax experts ask the authorities to clarify the government's decision to include all citizens above 18 years of age in the tax net by making it mandatory to open tax identification number files with the Inland Revenue Department. To further comprehend this, we have N.R. Gajendran of Gajma Company joining us on our new segment, Understanding Taxes in Sri Lanka.
A person will have to open an income tax file only if he is liable to pay tax and he has to file a return. If he is liable to pay a tax and if he has to file a return, he can ask for self-registration, and when that is applied for, the Commissioner General will evaluate, can either accept it and give him a TIN number to file his income tax return. Commissioner General can reject taxpayer's request and give his reasons within 14 days. But under the 31st May Gazette, the Finance Minister issued a regulation where he can request the Commissioner General to open file for certain class or groups of people. Similarly, from 1st of January, people who are over 18 years will have to register for a TIN number. It doesn't mean, as per this Gazette, those people are liable to pay income tax. Even without a liability, now over 18 years is also a class of people, they will have to register for TIN. Registering for TIN is different from registering to file an income tax return. He mustn't fill any the tax type codes. So he shouldn't technically get any returns by opening a TIN number. But practically, this can create complication because individual can wrongly open a TIN number and ask to file a return, and that means he is not liable to pay tax. And even there are cases of forced registration by the Commissioner General. The law allows for it. If the Commissioner General is satisfied the person is liable to tax, he has to file a return. So you might have a TIN and a TIN number and not file any returns if you are not liable to tax. If you are liable to tax, you will have to file a return. And already practical issues are there. This has to be clearly dealt with the Department of Inland Revenue, and the Commissioner General is obliged now to make a press announcement because all the people over 18 years will have to register a TIN, and so that he clearly explains this difference. It is opening a TIN is not that you have to file income tax returns, it is only registering for TIN. I wouldn't know why we couldn't use the identity card number as the TIN number, which was done in the past. Could have been done, then it would have been less complication for the people even to register, and even for forced registration it would have been much easier for the Commissioner General. Now there will be about 15 million people who will be over 18 years, and if all of them are going to register, the practicality has to be seen how the revenue is going to administer this.
The Colombo Stock Exchange ended lower for the 6th consecutive day today following losses in financials and consumer staple stocks. The CSE All-Share Index closed 0.37% lower at 10,507.85 points, while S&P SL20 was down 0.19% at 2,972.37 points. The Distilleries Company of Sri Lanka and Expo Lanka Holdings were the top losers on the index, falling 2.22% and 0.96% respectively. Trading volumes on the CSE All-Share Index rose to 28.6 million shares from 25.7 million shares in the previous session. Equity market turnover fell to 912.5 million rupees from 1.1 billion rupees in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to market turnover today, while the banking sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers offloading stocks worth 79.1 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers purchasing shares worth 864.1 million rupees. Let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies as the day progressed. Odell plc issued a statement highlighting that all resolutions set out in its notice of meeting were adopted by shareholders at the annual general meeting today. Meanwhile, People's HR by H. Senate Business Solutions PLC launched a major rebranding campaign in a move to fortify its brand image. That and more corporate affairs news right now. During the annual general meeting of Odell PLC today, all resolutions indicated in a notice issued beforehand were adopted by shareholders. The reappointment of JMJ Pereira as the director of the company and Ernst & Young as auditors of the company for the upcoming year were among the key resolutions. Meanwhile, People's HR by H. Senate Business Solutions PLC has launched a major rebranding campaign with the goal of strengthening its brand image to better fit into the ever-changing global human capital management market. In a move to empower businesses and individuals in HR management practices, a People's HR community has also been introduced. As such, this initiative is aimed at uniting HR thought leaders for growth and cooperation. In other news, Serendib Flour Mills Limited together with the Plantation Human Development Trust has launched Serendib Adishakti Fortified Wheat Flour for the nutritional needs of estate workers. The product as such has been developed in response to widespread micronutrient deficiencies and the increasing incidence of non-communicable diseases. Welcome back. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, together with the Department of Agriculture and the Mahaweli Authority of Sri Lanka, recently launched a Farmer Field Schools program to train 6,000 smallholder paddy farmers across 4 key rice-growing districts on sustainable approaches to paddy cultivation. The project, titled Rice Up, is an innovative project launched by FAO together with the Government of Sri Lanka, with €4 million in funding from the European Union to tackle the vulnerability of the food security system in Sri Lanka. 6,000 farmers from the Ampara, Badulla, Hambantota and Polonnaruwa districts will be trained by agriculture extension officers on applying the integrated plant nutrition management approach in their paddy cultivation to promote the efficient use of fertilizer, water and other agri inputs. The Farmer Field School program is also expected to facilitate soil testing and efficient fertilizer use through IPNM practices, emphasizing soil management, compost and biochar production. The program will also focus on implementing good agronomic practices. As heavy rains continue to batter Sri Lanka, 2 sluice gates of the Victoria Reservoir were opened last night. Add to this, the Met Department forecasted further heavy rains above 100 millimeters to occur at certain places in the country tomorrow. As heavy rains continue to affect the country, the livelihoods of the general public remain severely affected. The highest rainfall of 99.4 millimeters during the past 24 hours was recorded from the Diganaveva area in Puttalam. Sluice gates of several reservoirs continue to remain open due to heavy downpour. Two sluice gates of the Victoria Reservoir were opened last night as a result of the current heavy rains. With no signs of rains letting up, it has been almost 12 days since 20 residences in the Kataragama area were reportedly inundated. The Met Department forecasts heavy rains of above 100 millimeters to occur at certain parts of the country in the central, Sabaragamuwa, northwestern, north central and Uva provinces, with anticipated rains to occur at parts of the island during the night today. In other related news, the National Building Research Organisation issued amber landslide warnings to 6 districts. Accordingly, Level 2 amber landslide warnings were issued to parts of the Badulla, Kandy, Kegol, Kurunegala, Matara and Ratnapura districts. Speaking of water, a discussion on the implementation of the water supply sector reform program in Sri Lanka via the assistance of the Asian Development Bank was held at the Presidential Secretariat. The meeting, chaired by senior advisors to the President on National Security and Chief of Presidential Staff Sagala Ratnayaka and representatives of the Asian Development Bank, primarily addressed the policy planning and monitoring framework integral to the proposed reform program. Meanwhile, among the main objectives of the deliberations were the enhancing of the management of climate-resilient, safe and environmental sustainable water supply systems. It was further stated that the execution of this initiative will be jointly undertaken by the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Water Supply and the National Water Supply and Drainage Board. Now, in some truly spectacular news, which is bordering legendary, Sri Lanka's Akila Tirunayagi claimed 3 medals for Sri Lanka at the 22nd Asia Masters Athletics Championship that was held in Philippines. Representing Sri Lanka in the women's 1,500 meters event for athletes aged between, wait for it, 71 and 74, 72-year-old Tirunayagi claimed the gold medal by ending the event with a timing of 8 minutes and 38 seconds. She also represented Sri Lanka in the women's 5,000 meters event for athletes aged between 71 and 74 and claimed silver. Further, she won a bronze medal in the women's 800 meters, recording a timing of 4 minutes and 18:07 seconds. What's more, 72-year-old Tirunayagi claimed fourth in the women's 5,000 meters walk. Truly inspirational. That's all the news I have for you for now. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Have a blessed Wednesday ahead. Good night.